Next up on the broadcast, U.S. Senator Doug Jones of Birmingham is back in studio with us. Senator, welcome back to Capitol Journal.
Don, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Let's begin on a tragic note. More mass shootings, including one in our own home state this week, Limestone County. 5 members of the same family were killed, and we've also had another mass shooting in Texas in the last week or so.
One in Mobile last week. Fortunately, no one died, but 9 people injured.
Gun control continues to dominate this debate. We keep hearing that this is more a mental health issue than it is a gun control issue. Tell us where you stand where that's concerned.
Well, first of all, I try to avoid using the term gun control, because when you use that, people go to corners. And they don't want to talk about meaningful things that can get done to try to save lives. I like to talk about this in terms of gun violence, because that's what we've seen. It's what we saw in Mobile. It's what we saw in Limestone County this week. So I think there are measures that we can do. And I think mental health is a part of that. One of the things I want to emphasize when I get back to Washington is the fact that we need to let the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, actually do some studies about gun violence in this country. For years, there was an amendment to a bill called the Dickey Amendment that prohibited the CDC from looking at gun violence. We removed that last year after the Parkland shooting, but we didn't fund it. I think it's time to fund it. If people believe that mental health is a part of this, and I believe it is too, by the way, but it's only a part. We need to let the CDC do the same thing that they've done for automobile violence, for automobile wrecks, for products liability, those kind of things that we have spent millions and millions of dollars on that have saved lives. Let the CDC look. I think that's an important part of this debate that's going to be going forward, and I think that is one area that we can find some common ground on.
Dating back to the El Paso, Texas, Dayton, Ohio shootings of several weeks ago, we've heard renewed talk of stricter background checks, but it seems to go back and forth. Where are you on stricter background checks?
Well, I'm in favor of stricter background checks. I think the reason it's going back and forth is because no one is focused strictly on background checks themselves. Every side, again, when you mention certain things, they go to corners, and people on one side want to put in more, people on another side want to take away more, and so you get the background checks alone stuck in the middle and nothing gets done. What I want to do when we get back next week is to try to get a bill pending, and my staff's looking at this, that will just focus on background checks and a couple of other things that I know people might agree with. Things like the red flag laws, things like closing the boyfriend loophole, a couple of those simple things, and not get into the extraneous, not do comprehensive things. Let's get some things done that we know can get done. Let the American people have some confidence that we're moving forward on those things. I think a background check bill could pass. I think it should pass, and I think it can be done reasonably. That will not be an infringement, not give people a hard time when it comes to buying and selling a gun, but just do those things that make common sense.
Do you agree with the contention that has been raised during this debate that background checks may not have prevented a lot of these recent mass shootings?
It may not have, but you know what? It's not necessarily that's where people get focused on the news of the day. Perhaps they wouldn't have prevented something that happened in the last month. But if what happened in the last month lets us do something that will prevent others in the future, and other violence, there's no question that additional background checks will stop people from getting their hands on guns, getting guns in the wrong hands. So it may not have stopped these, but it will stop other deaths in the future. Because the goal here is not just these mass shootings. You know, Don, we lose 40,000 Americans a year to when a gun discharges, 40,000 Americans die. About 24,000 of those are from suicides. That's not just a mental health issue. That's an access to gun issue. So many of them are done on a spur of the moment. It's a training issue. There's a lot of things that we can do to save lives, and that's the goal, to save lives.
Senator, you were recently named one of the most bipartisan lawmakers in Congress. Do you see this gun violence issue possibly being a bipartisan issue? It seems to have been so divided along political lines for so long.
It has been, and I think that the special interest groups have divided us. It should be a bipartisan issue. It's been a bipartisan issue in the past. It ought to be a bipartisan issue again. Saving lives, Don, this is not guns. This is not about guns. This is about saving lives. Guns are a part of that. And saving lives ought to be probably the most bipartisan issue that we have in the Congress of the United States. And so I think we can come to some common ground. If we stay off the fringes and not worry about that yet, and let's do the things that we can and not just get on political soapboxes on one side or the other, do those things that we can do and let the Senate do its job, let the House do its job, come to some agreements. I think we could reach some of that. I think the president needs to weigh in, because he is the leader of the Republican Party. He needs to exercise some leadership. The last thing that we need is for him to say one thing and then immediately start walking it back like he's done on this issue. I'm hoping that when we get back, he will once again come and let's say what we can do to work things out. And it's got to be more than just mental health issues. It really has to be more than just mental health. We've talked about mental health, and there's a couple things that we know that do not work. We can look and see what doesn't work. And frankly, one of them is blaming this on mental health. That just doesn't work because we blamed that for a long time. The second thing is we've given a lot of thoughts and prayers over the years for these victims and families, and it ain't working. As a religious a nation as we are, as a Christian nation and state as we are, those thoughts and prayers just don't seem to be working like they should. So we need to get down and do our work. The Lord can take care of his business if we can do ours.
Senator, as you know, Alabama is one of the staunchest pro-Second Amendment states in the nation. Do you find that a delicate balancing act when you approach this?
I don't know if it's a balancing act. Look, I'm a pro-Second Amendment guy, too. I mean, I love to hunt. I love to shoot. You know, that's what I think where people mistake. Most folks that really are not gun owners think it's just about hunting. It's not. It's about enjoying getting out at a target range and just shooting. I grew up that way. So many people in Alabama have done that. We've just led to believe that if you do anything at all, then all of a sudden the federal government's going to come and take your gun away. Well, that's just not going to happen. So I think we can balance some things. I think we can do some things that will make people safer. I think gun owners, by and large, are fine. You know, for years, Don, we had gun laws in this country that prohibited a certain round of magazine, you know, when you went deer hunting or when you went turkey hunting. Hunters didn't complain about that too much. It was just part of it. Now we got 100-round magazines for these AR-15s. Now that's something that I just think's a little outrageous. And I don't think the Second Amendment protects a 100-round magazine. So I think hunters, by and large, would like to see. They don't really have. They're used to regulations. They're used to hunting regulations. They're used to having to go. In Alabama, in order to get a hunting license, you got to take a course just to go hunting. Well, you don't have to do that to go buy a gun necessarily. You just got to pass a background. And I'm not advocating that you take a course for everything, but the point is that firearms owners are used to some modest rules and regulations that they follow, and they're like that, and they do that because they know that protects them and their ability to possess and enjoy their firearms.